You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
In order for people to care about you, they need to like you, right? And so what's most likable is that you're relatable, right? To that person, right? And so stories are the thing that makes us relate to others the best, right? I could tell you facts about my life, but if I told you those facts in a story, you'd be like, me too. You know what I mean? Versus if I just told you a bunch of facts, right? I consider it such a win. Like I got a lead the other day, and I always ask, like, what about me, makes you want to work with me? And she said, I was reading your bio on your profile, and like it felt like it was my story.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Alli, welcome to The Break. So glad to have you here. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be really fun. You said this is the last call of your week, which is amazing. You take Fridays off. So I want to go out with a bang here. We're recording here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. At least it's beautiful in the Midwest in May.
Beautiful here in the Northeast too. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So we're going to send this week out with a bang. Where I want to start is how you and I met. I guess we're kind of meeting for the first time, but we've also sort of digitally met. Yeah. So I want to get our listeners cued into how I got hooked up with you. So I happened to see one of your posts on LinkedIn, as many of the guests who come on this show, I happen to meet on LinkedIn, but I'm going to read verbatim the post. So it says, I
don't even remember this post. So this is
I
fun.
will tell you, Here we go.
Yeah.
The stability we all once thought came from a 9-to-5 is no longer true. So here's 7 things you should never feel bad about again. Number 1, taking time off guilt-free, having a gap on your resume ever, leaving a good job that pays you well to pursue a passion, not taking extra projects at work and having healthy boundaries, declining a really good job offer because the company doesn't align to your values, leaving a company because of a bad boss, starting a side hustle, and talking about it on LinkedIn. You are the priority in your life, not the company you work for. Make decisions with you in mind first. So
what great content writing, eh?
Beautiful. Perfect.
Perfectly executed.
So what caught my attention about this is something that I think about all the time. So the first line, you noticed or realized that the stability we all once thought came with a 9-to-5 is no longer true. I personally have never thought that it was stable, but I am a sort of a paranoid schizophrenic on that topic.
Maybe you should have said the delusion.
The delusion.
Yeah.
Delusion is a great word.
Yeah.
So I want to know how you realized this.
Well, I think so. The kind of birth of that post came obviously recently in the wake of all the layoffs, right? And I work with people in the corporate world. And so, I'm kind of inundated, and, if you hang out on LinkedIn long enough, you're going to see the content about being laid off. Right. And so, I made my jailbreak from corporate 3 years ago in the midst of the pandemic as well. Right. And so that was like the first real time that people of our age really experienced any kind of like mass layoffs, right? Because obviously when the pandemic first when Tom Hanks got COVID and the world shut down, like they started to what they call furloughed people, right? You may or may not have a job, we don't know, type of thing, right? And like I said, so that was like the first time people that of our age have ever experienced that. Before that, it was like, if you do a good job, you'll stay at the company, and if you don't, you'll leave, right? And so I'm fascinated that you've never thought that it was stable. And I, as I said, I think I was under the delusion that it was stable. I think also because I come from a family of not entrepreneurs. I come from a family of like, my dad worked at the same company for like 40 years until he retired there, you know? And so like in my world, it was stable, right? I grew up with this very stable, you know, character in my life who literally never got fired and continued to grow and get promoted. And we moved different countries with that company and, you know, all these different things. And so in my mind, it's like, oh, that's what you do to have that kind of life of stability, you know? And so I did that. But then I realized this sucks. I don't want to like I don't want to wear this monkey suit, quite frankly, for the rest of my life, in the sense of like putting on the mask of having to pretend I care about the bottom line of this $20 billion company, you know, that, you know, obviously I worked at Salesforce and Mark Benioff doesn't know I exist. And like, That's fine. But that doesn't make me feel all that confident that my place at that company is going to be forever there. Right. And so, yeah, that I think I was very much under the spell that it was that I was stable. And then I was coming up against the fact that like, despite the stability, the so-called stability, this doesn't feel good enough to stay. Like this is too uncomfortable for me to stay.
Yeah. So just to give you a little window into my world, and I'm not going to monopolize this podcast. This is about you, but I grew up, and I'm probably a little bit older than you, but I grew up, coming out of college is the tech crash. And so trying to like get a job at that point in time where jobs were scarce. Then I was actually in finance. I was a trader. So I was very in tune to risk, to comings and goings of companies, growth and death of industries and things like that. And pivoted my career sort of around the time of the great financial crisis. And then obviously have lived through the pandemic and so forth. And so I feel like I have, number one, been at the epicenter of risk and understanding what sort of underpins markets and economies, but then also sort of have lived at influential times in my life through these big periods of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And so it's always just been sort of an accepted thing. And I don't believe that I'm necessarily a entrepreneur, risk taker, like wired that way. I feel like it's come out of sort of necessity of needing to adapt through these times.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my perspective on the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask more, but I'll let you.
Well, maybe we will get there. Okay. So you realize that things aren't necessarily stable. And frankly, that you have this realization that sort of, you know what? I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to wear this monkey suit, as you said. So that there are other factors in play, not just stability, right? So how did you start to think about valuing those perspectives that you had in yourself and juxtaposing that with what other people think or what the norm is?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think what started to happen was I was taught to value stability. Right. As we all are. And then I was like, okay, so I'm living this life of valuing stability, but I'm not happy. So clearly the value of stability cannot be my number one value because it doesn't actually make me happy. And the equation for like fulfillment and contentment is like you live a life aligned to your values. And then like what happens is the fulfillment and contentment, right? But it wasn't. So I was like, okay, so this value is wrong, right? And so I essentially was like, okay, I could, the other piece of it too that I honed in on was like, who else is living this value of stability? And what do their lives look like, 20 years down the line? If I continue down this path of stability as my value, what will my life look like? And so I looked at the people that I was working with who were, 10, 15 years ahead of me. And not one of them was I inspired by or wanted to have their life. You know what I mean? Like we're like, whatever, the Teslas that they owned and all that I was like, who cares? Like they're literally a slave to this job. And oh God, the part that killed me the most that, is probably going to be pretty clear how much I hate pretending. I was just like, how can you pretend this much? You can't possibly care about these corporate priorities as much as you're showing people that you do. Like, I just couldn't, I was like, there's no chance I could do that. Like, I cannot fake it for that long and like literally pretend that like Dreamforce is the best thing that's ever happened, And so it's just like, if I continue to value stability, that's like going to end in a life that I don't actually want. Right. And I think that was like an interesting realization for me, because the life that I got to have because of my dad was actually amazing. Like I said, so we got to move around. Like I grew up in Paris and then I moved to New York. I'm originally Canadian. So, we got to literally like live in the two most like popular cities in the whole world, like that tourists want to go to every single year. Right. And that was because of my dad's very stable job. So growing up, it was like this confusing thing of like, oh, that's the kind of life that you get from stability. But yet I tried it on and I was like, I don't think that I want that. And so I had this inkling after so much fear of like, what if I could do this myself? Like, what if I stopped valuing stability and valued something else, which is like valued my own skills and abilities more than the stability that I got from the job. And so that's been the hypothesis that I've been running on for the past 3 years, is like, what if I valued my own skills and abilities more than I valued the stability of a paycheck, or not even the stability, the consistency of a paycheck too.
It's really interesting. And I think in my experience, I had the same sort of feeling. Like, I need alignment. I think I totally agree with you. I think like essentially happiness is alignment between like who you are naturally and sort of what you do or how you express that, I guess, in the world. I feel like you can do it in a number of different ways. I frankly didn't listen to it. So I just sort of sat for a long time with this discontentment because I was running this default program of like what success is and what happiness is. And it's hard work, right? Like, you find purpose through hard work, which I believe you actually can, but it's not the be all end all. It's money as the barometer, of success.
Status,
and status and all these other markers, right? Title, credentials, like that was my sort of, worldview, and
same.
Feeling it internally and not knowing like what that meant was really hard for me. So like, I would feel that like, this isn't right, but I didn't know what that meant, because I was, you're trained for your brain, you're trained for the past and what you've seen and the examples of success. Yeah. So I'm wondering.
Well, then you're like, I'm broken.
Exactly. Yeah.
The
you start to blame yourself.
Not broken. I'm broken.
Totally. Yeah. Look at everybody else, right? 96% of people out there, like, they're just trudging along having like, why do I feel like this? I'm the odd man out. Like, there's something wrong with me for sure.
Yeah.
With enough work, you realize you're the only one that's got your head pulled out of the sand. But
they're the problem.
But in that moment, like, I'm wondering, like, have you ever thought about what it is about your maybe upbringing, or who you are that allowed you to kind of listen to that more? That's kind of a selfish question for me, just because I had such a difficult time with it, I guess. But I'm curious as to if you've pinpointed it.
Yeah. So I have always been super fascinated with like human behavior in general. Like, even as a kid, my mom would tell me back in the day when Melrose Place was like the hottest show on TV. And I was like very young, so I probably shouldn't be watching Melrose Place, but she would like let me watch it. And I would like predict the relationships that were going to happen, or like, oh, mom, like he's going to kiss her, like before they've ever kissed ever on this show, like I was always very attuned to humans and people. And once I found out the like subject of like personal development, right, and like personal growth space in terms of like books and podcasts and whatnot, I was like, oh my God, like I've found the thing that I've been like, that I'm obsessed with. So the obsession started with actually a book on Buddhism. And that really like clued me into the fact that like, actually you are the problem in the way that you're interpreting the world around you, right? And it came off the back of feeling very disappointed with life, with people and their choices, and kind of victimizing myself. And thank God, a mentor of mine was like, I think you need to read about Buddhism, because like he was wise enough to be like, you're not the victim here, like the way that you're interpreting these situations, right? So that started me on this like path that I'm still on, and I hope to be on for the rest of my life, of like literally studying myself. It sounds like completely self-involved, but like I am my most favorite subject to study, right? And so I like every podcast I listen to, every book I read, like all about like self-development, the brain, neuroscience, human behavior, like all of it, right? And that led me to, at a very young, I think super young age, to, and maybe now it's not as young, but at the time, it was like 10 years ago, I hired a coach when I was like 26 years old. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know what coaching was. Like no one really knew what coaching was like 10 years. I mean, some people did, but it was like not mainstream like it is now. Like every Tom, Dick, and Harry is a coach on LinkedIn now. And I know that and I get it. But then it wasn't a thing, right? And so at like the age of 26, I was already very like self-reflective to be like, I need help getting out of my own way, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was at a point in my career at Salesforce where I had just come off of a year of being the number one rep and all this kind of stuff that makes you think you feel good, but it's all just a Band-Aid, right? And then I got promoted, and then I was not the number one rep, and my whole world was like spinning out of control because I was just like piling on the shame and, the self-criticism and whatnot. And so I found a coach at that time, and I actually kept that same coach for 8 years. So I had this like literal like personal trainer of my mind for 8 years, where I could study the inner workings of my mind. And despite that, was still extremely afraid to take the leap and leave the corporate world. Like, despite knowing so much about myself, I was literally deathly afraid. So I knew I actually tried to leave the corporate world right after working with her the first time. So when I was like 26, I was like just so full of zest for life. And I'm like, I'm going to go be a coach, and I'm going to like, rule the world. Thank God I didn't try to do that at 26, because I had like no clout at that time. But so I actually like resigned from Salesforce. I gave in my resignation letter and everything. And then they wanted me to stay. And so I ended up staying because I was too afraid. And I stayed for like basically 8 more years, or 6 more years, and then 2 more years at a different company. But so it took me 8 years to like, despite knowing so much about myself, still get over that fear, right? And so I appreciate this question, because I often like reflect on this to be like, I have not always been the person that's like, take the risk, like bet on yourself. Like I was the person that was afraid for basically 33 years of my life. Like I was not ever a risk taker. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I was the good girl, 100%. I got good grades. I went to the best school in Canada. Like I, graduated with honors. Like I got a job immediately. I work at in Canada at the time, and like Salesforce was like literally the number one tech company to work for in Canada. Like I was the number one, like I did it all the way I was supposed to. And back to our first point, which is like, and yet this doesn't feel good. Right. Yeah. And so then I had to really dive into like, why doesn't this feel good? Right. And why am I not willing to give myself permission to feel better? Right. Mm-hmm. Because of the fear and everything. Right. And so there was like just this fundamental switch, and this sounds like really kind of cheesy in the end, but it's like, like you heard a message a million times, but then like the 1 millionth and one time you like, it really sinks in. So it was the pandemic. And at the time in Canada, I mean, everything was shut down. In America, it was less so, right? In Canada, it was like everything was shut down for like a year. Like you couldn't do anything. And basically I was like stuck in an apartment, not happy. And I was doing my personal development research as always, right? YouTube or podcasts and whatnot. But anyways, I came across the Jim Carrey commencement speech.
Oh, sure.
Which,
Yeah.
of course. And it's the story about his dad, right? And he says how his dad could have been a great comedian, but he chose the safe, stable route of being an accountant, the least funny job in the whole world. And then he gets fired from being an accountant. And then his family, went through some really, really hard times. And so he says, I learned a lot of things from my father. And one of them being that you can fail at what you don't even like. So you might as well try at what you love. And I'm not even kidding. That changed the chemistry in my brain. Like just hearing it in that moment at that time during the pandemic, hating my job, knowing I want to be a coach, knowing I'm a great all these things. I was just like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck am I doing? Honestly. And once I decide something, it happens immediately. It took me 8 years to get to that decision, but once I've decided, I decide overnight, right? And I just change it overnight. And so I basically the next week quit my job, gave them a month of notice or whatever. And then April or March 31st is my last day. And literally by April 3rd, I was like, all right, started a business, and I started creating content on LinkedIn. Basically, I think April 7th was my first piece of content on LinkedIn.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
So I've got a bunch of follow-up questions here because this is really fascinating. Because I think about the reason I like moments so much, and your moment, right? It's 8 years to get to one moment where
overnight moment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like an overnight moment. That's really interesting because we have it's interesting to me how a moment can completely change your life.
Yeah.
Yet we also have so much resistance to giving into that thing for so long, until the conditions are right. So I start to think about how do you engineer the conditions for yourself to take, whether you call it risk or bold action or follow alignment. I was talking with my coaching group today. We had a little mastermind, and I was talking about going from logicality to possibility, and how and what are the tools that we can use to get our brain, who wants to stay in logic mode and cling to safety, into embracing more of the upside possibility in the sort of unknown future, right? Can we actually do things to engineer this? And so in your story, where I'm going with this is, you were sort of resistant to this alignment. You weren't giving into it, right?
Yeah.
There was obviously clinging.
I knew, but I wasn't giving in.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I say is the conflict comes, your heart has already left. Your heart's gone from corporate, basically, right? Yeah. But your brain is just clinging to everything that you know and all the evidence you've seen in the past. And that's literally the source of conflict.
Yeah.
Within you. So you knew, and you were holding on, and two things happened. One is you heard a familiar voice, but it hit you and resonated in a certain way. And two, you had a forcing function. You had a little bit of a forcing function, a nudge over the edge. And I've always been resistant to the burning of the boats mentality, because I'm a former trader. I always wanted to be hedged. I want to have options open, all of this kind of stuff. But I've really come around to that. And obviously the pandemic was a forcing function for a lot of people. And so I'm wondering how do you feel about do you have to, are you a burn the boats type of person? Or were there any other tools that you used to sort of get yourself to the ledge and ultimately over for the leap?
Yeah. So I would have never considered myself a burning the boats person. And I still remain and have great ties to that world. Right.
Right.
But I have burned the boats in my own mind. Mm-hmm. in the sense of like, I honestly think that I have had the level of success I've had over the 3 years of, running my coaching business completely, solo on LinkedIn, because I've burned the boats in my mind. Like there's no choice. I was actually explaining this today to one of my clients, right? Every client, because now I coach corporate leaders who want to leave the corporate world and start a coaching business, right? And of course, obviously, what their number one fear is, which is like, what are people going to think of what I write on LinkedIn? And I'm so afraid of, what are people going to say, right? Which is just like so hilarious after a while, because just like literally nobody cares. And nobody's gonna see it.
I just want to do the like cricket sound.
Literally
every time.
You are over exaggerating how many people are going to see this.
Yeah.
You're going to get like one like,
Yeah.
And so when I think about the burning the boats in my mind and LinkedIn, like, listen, LinkedIn is a minefield for your brain. And like, you're not going to get likes in the beginning. Nobody's going to care. You're going to like pour your heart into your content and literally nobody is even going to bat an eye, right? Like it's so gutting. It's like so gutting, right?
Yeah.
And it's so easy to quit because it's like you are going to be suck for so long before you even taste success, And so most people are like, F that. Why would I ever do that, right? But I had the good news about the 8 years of not doing anything is that I was like this being a coach, like I was so fucking sure of it after 8 years. Like my dream of being a coach never faltered for 8 years, right? So once I took that leap and I was like, no, I'm doing this because it's my dream. Like, again, there was no going back, right? And so the concept I was explaining to my clients today was just like, so many people spend too much time and energy on their fears and what the inner critic is saying about it. And it's to be expected that you're going to be afraid and that your inner critic is going to tell you you're a loser and no one likes you and all these kind of things. Like, but spending energy on that is such a waste of time when you could just be spending your energy figuring out how to get better, right? And that has been my mindset from the beginning on LinkedIn because I burn the boats in my mind, right? I'm just like, okay, obviously some of this is painful because nobody cares about what I'm saying. Who cares? Figure out how I get them to care about what I'm saying. Versus so many of my clients will then go down the fear route and then start to make justifications for why it's not going to work for them.
Right.
Versus trying to figure out how the hell it's going to work, right?
Right.
And so letting that fear, so I appreciate those 8 years of self, reflection and awareness that I gained because I knew that was all going to happen. And I was just like, and who cares? Like, do the thing that's going to get you there. So that's one part. The other piece I wanted to say about the friction and whatnot, when I now look back, hindsight 2020, and now you could put the puzzle pieces together that you had no idea you were creating, right? And so there was a few things that were happening that led up to this. Obviously, I mentioned one of them with the coaching and, my obsession with the personal development. But the other piece of it was who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can attest to this as well. And so right before the pandemic, I ended up getting into a relationship with someone I had actually known for a while. We knew of each other. And I had never considered him romantically or anything like that. But we ended up meeting one day in July 2018. Was it 2018? Yeah. And he was at Salesforce as well, but he left Salesforce to start a company. And so in his decision to leave Salesforce and start a company, and then when I met up with it, or, when he was at this party and I was at this party, his value in my mind, I know it sounds like kind of shitty, but like his value in my mind changed. Because I was like, now he's not just like some other schmuck from Salesforce like me. He's a schmuck that left Salesforce, that bet on himself to leave Salesforce and start a company. And I was so intrigued by that because I knew deep inside I wanted to do that too, right? Mm-hmm. So we start dating and we're still together to this day. And so I had this person, I was living 24 hours a day now with this person who had already taken that leap, who had already done the hard thing that I wanted to do, right? And so whenever I came to him and was like, oh, what do you think? Whatever, he was like, 100% do it, right? Like, he didn't have the same fear as I did because he had already gone through the experience. But I also think I strategically chose him for that, right? Of
Yeah.
like, I want to be with a person that has done that. Like, I'm attracted to that, right? So I was pulling in people into my life that were helping me become the person that I wanted to be, right? And funny enough, from him too, his head of HR left their company to become a coach, and she started traveling the world and doing all like basically what I wanted to do. And I was just like, okay, if this chick can do it, I can do it. You know what I mean? So I think it's also about who you start to surround yourself with that becomes the conditions and the catalyst as well.
Right. So I think about it as like sort of like the flywheel effect, like building a belief flywheel or whatever, that you can do something and lean into that possibility. So like there are tools I feel like we can use. So you just described a bunch of them, like having examples, right? Examples of people who have done it before you, logically to your brain means you can do that too, as long as you're, similar to them.
Yeah.
So taking micro actions, experimentation, like those things I'm curious about. Did you do anything in that 8 years to take a step towards coaching, or was it a light switch? Like, I'm working on myself and then all of a sudden I get this realization and I'm a coach. Like, how does your brain work there?
Yeah. No, definitely took lots of different steps. So I got a coach, and that made me be a coach. So then I got trained as a coach, and then so I got my coach training, but then I like I said, I'm obsessed with this stuff. So then I also got a certification in positive psychology. And I also started coaching on the side, like very, sporadically, if you will. Right. I even started volunteering coaching for like a friend's company and whatnot. So that's what I mean. Like, those 8 years served me so well, because by the point that I finally left, I had no doubt. And I was a leader for 5 years before that. So I was coaching every single day, right? So there was no doubt in my mind when I left. I had none of the like, oh, are people going to believe me as a coach? Like, what are you talking about? Of course, I've been coaching this whole time. You know what I mean? So that really worked well, because some people don't have all of that experience. And so that fear is like unbearable.
Right. You did some experiments, you took some steps, understanding sort of like your why and how you want to do that. Like, that's a tool, being very connected to like what you want to do. That's a tool that you can sort of live in to get yourself mentally into the realm of possibility. You talked about people. I am really curious. Like, the question I always ask people who are like on the fence and worried or fearful is like, back in that time period before you had been a coach, in this 8 years, you're taking steps. What did you need to see? If you could go back, what did you need to see to believe that you could have done it earlier?
So the reason why I hadn't done it was because I hadn't seen it done successfully, if you will, right? So
for you or for others?
For others.
Okay.
So my coach was amazing and whatnot, but I remember her always telling me like, oh, it's really hard to find clients. Like, it's really hard. It's really hard. And I was like, okay, well, that's not promising. And then once I got into like the coaching, coach training world, and I started to tell everyone that, I'm becoming a coach, then all of a sudden everyone's aunt and mom and, distant cousin is a coach. Right. And I'm like, I never knew this before. But anyways, so then I started to talk to all these people and asking their experience of being a coach. And like, none of them were successful coaches. So there was a problem in my mind, which is like, I don't think coaching is very successful. Right.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to like quitting at 26, thank God I didn't do that to become a coach, because I think it was also very hard to be a coach back when people really wanted you to be face to face. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, therapy, like when you think about therapy, like you go and see your therapist face to face. Like, there was no online therapy, right? So again, to your point of like the pandemic being this like catalyst in these conditions, thank God, because now everyone was fine with the online thing, which is also why I was like, oh, I think I can do this. But coming back to this head of HR at my partner's company that left to be a coach. At first, I was very annoyed with all of her posting about it on Instagram, but I was annoyed because I was jealous and I knew that. And I wanted to unfollow her, but I was like, no, this is good for you, right? Like, keep this in your life because this is showing you what's possible, right? And so, so she like moved to Costa Rica and she's like living this awesome life. And I love the jungle and I love the beach and everything. And then she was very, vocal about how much money she was making and, showing off her success, which I was very grateful for. And honestly, I was like, holy shit, there is nothing different between me and her. Like, if anything, I probably have more experience than her, quite frankly. And so the only difference is that I just didn't make the leap. Like, I don't have the same balls as she does, right? Like, that was it in my mind. And so once I started to see even just one example of like, it's possible, I was like, oh, I'm in. Like, if, again, not like she's wonderful and she's, smart in all these things in all her ways, but I was like, if she can do it, I can do it. There's no question in my mind, right? So I was very thankful that I kept her around in my feed because I honestly think that we really do need the like, and I think that's what I've become for people on, the certain followers that I have on LinkedIn is like, they see my success and they're like, oh, so you really can't, like, the question I get all the time, can you really like make money on LinkedIn and like make enough money to like live your life? And I'm like, dude, this is my only job and I live a very nice life, so I don't know what the question is here because it's a yes, it's a very big yes. But people, if you've never seen it, it's like Sasquatch, right? You don't really believe it's true, right?
True. Yeah. It's like, I think society works against us too, right? Because everybody's flexing. Everybody is overstating Instagram, Facebook, like influencer culture, right? Like it's all a big ass flex, which is
hard to believe what's true.
Yeah, it is hard to believe what's true. So how do you, as a very authentic, grounded, and transformational coach, like how do you cut through that on social media using the same marketing channels and things like that?
Yeah. Well, I'm really big in personal story and content being personal story. That piece that you saw, less of a personal story. So, but the majority of my content stems from personal story, right? And also, and the reason why that works, first and foremost, is you need to, in order for people to care about you, they need to like you, right? And so what's most likable is that you're relatable, right? To that person, right? And so stories are the thing that makes us relate to others the best, right? I could tell you facts about my life, but if I told you those facts in a story, you'd be like, me too. You know what I mean? Versus if I just told you a bunch of facts, right? And so, I mean, I consider it such a win. Like I got a lead the other day and I always ask like, what about me, makes you want to work with me? And she said, I was reading your bio on your profile and like, it felt like it was my story. And I was like, nailed it, because like, that's what you want people to feel. Right.
Yeah.
So I just try to write my own story and I can only tell what's true. And in terms of like the flexing and all that, like, obviously it's so gross. And so I flex certain things that I know would be inspiring if I was in their shoes because it inspired me when I was in their shoes, right? Like
what? Like some examples.
So literally, I like followed in this girl's footsteps. So she went to Costa Rica, right? And so I went to Costa Rica. I was like, I'm inspired to go to Costa Rica because of her, right? And so I've documented about Costa Rica. Other than coaching, it's the second thing that people ask me about the most is like when they're traveling to Costa Rica, where do I go? What do I do? Okay. Because I documented the whole thing. And I documented the fact that I just quit my job and I'm traveling solo and I'm starting a business and I'm going to talk about it on LinkedIn. So I became like the Costa Rica girl and like the girl who lives in like the beach and like the flip-flops and everything. But that was just true. Like that was actually my life. Right. And so I think the other piece of this too is like, to be authentic, you also have to like go and live your life.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you have a boring ass life and you're depressed, I don't know how you're going to write content that is going to be anything other than that, right? Because it would be a lie, right? So I'm not like writing content every single second of the day because I'm actually living my life. And so when you actually have an interesting life, then you could talk about it and people actually care, right? So my big thing is like, yes, I've been wanting to be a coach and I want to run my own business, but more so than anything, I wrote a post recently about this. My desire to leave the corporate world was to like stop being a corporate employee and start being a human more.
Yeah.
And so my whole quest is just to human more, really. Oh, and by the way, I'm also building this business, right? And I think that like, if you're down with that, yeah, well, you'll probably be down with me. And if you're not, then you're not going to be down with me, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's about like really knowing what you're about. And again, I just don't have the fears about what are people going to think about. I don't care. I just really don't. Like, this is me. And I hope that some of you don't like me. That would be great, to be honest. Right? Haters is a good thing.
That's getting back to that alignment piece. And it's so freeing to just be able to be who you are. And we're living at this amazing like Renaissance time, I feel like, where we can actually do that. Like we can create micro businesses or solopreneur businesses or even scaled businesses where our differentiator is us living our lives. Like that is so cool to me, I feel like. And I think that's like the missed opportunity of people who are continuing to live in that fear is like the holy grail is you just be you. I mean, look, for me, I'm a white male, right? So from the outside, everybody is like, oh, you know, you have every advantage in life. And my parents made a lot of money too. Hey, how about that? Like, which my parents live very well and I got paid for my college. And so I've had every advantage, right? And yet I still felt like something was wrong with me for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I tried a whole bunch of shit, different jobs, pivoting careers, entrepreneurship, trade, all this stuff, therapy, like everything, right? To try to figure it out when it was really just, I just had to like, just be me. And so being me is me being an at-home dad to these three dudes and flexing my life at their baseball games at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
Building fire, like that kind of stuff. And like, that's maybe not like so exotic or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Yeah.
And
there's so many dudes in the world, you know?
Yeah.
And like, the one thing I wanted to say as you were talking was this unique time that we're in. I mean, it's literally never happened before in our existence, that the access to internet and you know, all these like being able to make money on a social platform like that never happened before. Like our parents like don't even understand the concept, right? And back in the day, the only way to flex was like just to literally like have so much money and like, you know, like I think of like as you're talking, I was thinking about Tony Robbins. I'm like, does anyone want his life? I guess maybe the money part, but like and they want like his mind, you know, the mindset that he has. But it's like there wasn't a way to actually talk about like to flex your life before, and the only way to do it was to just have a bunch of money to do it. Now, like when I think about my travels and whatnot, like, dude, I stayed in hostels. Like that was my thing. Like I don't want to stay in a bougie that's not my thing, right? And like the traveling, like you can travel for so cheap now. Like you actually don't have to have money to travel, you know? So it's like you're not flexing money, you're flexing lifestyle and like enjoyment and like actually being a human in the world. Whereas like that was never flexed before. Like think of all the like billionaires that we know. Like I don't think anyone wants any of their lives. Like they just have a bunch of money, but we're like, okay, well, your life, I don't even know about your life actually, you know?
Yeah, you got to like armed guards and flying in a helicopter would be great, but like, I mean,
until you're Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs, and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
I want to make one point because you just brought it up again. Your idea of just being more human in the world is so interesting to me, because if you go to my about page on my website, I literally say, like, I'm trying to be a full stack human. Like,
this is why we got along.
Yeah, exactly. Like, be creative, be productive. Like, I believe in work and value and all of that stuff. Be spiritual, be a dad and fam, like all
be
of the
present,
things that,
like be there.
Yeah. And be able to like not put any of that stuff off.
Yeah.
Right. Like the idea, I'm cooking up a post right now. It's like, I'm 43. All my friends are, planning for retirement. And that makes me want to puke, because like, I just like, let's enjoy these guys. I got 18 summers, why can't I take a piece of that, live now, and then just continue to work? Because again, we live in a renaissance. I get to use my mind instead of my back. I get to create. Why wouldn't I want to keep creating and doing things and helping people in the world at 80 or 90 years old?
Yeah. Dude, I have to tell you, like, it makes me cringe when people are like, I want to retire early and like retire when I'm 40 or whatever. I'm like, bro, to do what?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with do you know how much time there is?
Yeah.
Like, that does, like, I get so turned off when people tell me that. And I'm like, I don't know if we're going to be a fit. Like, I'm not trying to retire you at 40. I don't know what the fuck you're going to do with your life after that, because there's so much more to live. And I think people just say that, like, why it annoys me is like, people just say it. They don't actually think it through. Right.
Yeah.
Which is like, what are you going to do for 40 freaking years? Even if you have money, you'll be bored out of your mind. You're meant to do something with your mind, you know?
It's a default reaction. So,
I hate this job. I want to get out of it. Yeah.
Or my parents' goal was have a great retirement. I want to beat them. So I just want to retire sooner. Yeah. Like, that's as far as it's thought through. Seriously. Yeah. Like, and then, meanwhile, they're just missing the examples like you, for instance, who are out doing the things. Oh, I want to retire early so I can travel. Well, Alli travels and works and has a pretty good friggin' life. Like, how about we try to figure out and put our effort into doing that? So we can continue to create and serve people.
And I love that was the first thing you said in your full stack humanness, because when I was in the corporate world, I didn't know anything about the creation world, right? I was in execution mode. You tell me what to do and I go do it.
Exactly.
Right. And I became a monkey in that system of like, I am a doer, right? I never had to think or create anything, literally, right? And now coming to this world, right, the world of creation, I'm like, I'm so much more connected to my humanness in this world, because I truly believe that our God-given gift and like the thing that keeps us on this planet is creation. Absolutely. Like, full stop. But yet, whatever, the conspiracy of the world, which is like, take that away from people because then they'll feel too alive and too good.
Right.
Make them mindless doers that pay taxes. Right.
Yes.
And so creation is, I'm like obsessed with creation. And because it just actually feels so freaking good. Like, I was just talking to a client. I'm like, I've literally been creating something from nothing for the past 3 years. And I cannot tell you the level of confidence that has given me in life.
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
Like, try me, like I'm sure I can figure it out. Truly,
Yep. Drop me on a desert island. I'll figure out how to survive, because I built a business from zero to $1 million online. Like, I mean, it's seriously
clickety-clacketing on the computer,
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, so I want to run something by you and get your take on it, because what we've been talking about, like default behaviors, this renaissance concept, the opportunity that we have, in front of us, the words that I use, I just want to get your take as a copywriter, as a content creator. The words I use are that we've become dependent on, and I use corporate, but it's a societal thing overall. Like we are dependent on the lanes that have been drawn, the work that's been giving, all of that stuff. So I want to help people break this dependence. And I think what people are really after, this creation piece, is this idea of being self-directed, like having the ability to influence and direct where they go in life, have more control, and assert that creativity. And so I just want to get your, you are totally free to say, Mike, that sucks. But it's just kind of like a real time, like copywriting thing. How does that message resonate? Break corporate dependence, build a self-directed life.
So it's definitely dependence. Although the thing that came to my mind was like, because you started saying like within the lines, the swim lanes or whatever. The word that came to mind was rules. So, and then break the rules, right? So there's like these rules that we all have, like an operating system that we don't even know is running. And it's, in order to operate, it has certain rules and constraints that it lives by. And the thing that came up as you were saying that was back to your question of like, what did you need to see or know or be told when you were afraid to make you not afraid, right? And so that is exactly what I thought about when you were saying, they want a self-directed life of creation. And I'm like, do they know that though? Yeah. Like they're so deep in the system of dependency that I don't know. Like I had no idea about creation before I started. That world it didn't exist. There was no world of creation in my mind. Like I had no idea what the upside would be. I couldn't even use those words because it was like discovering like a new piece of land on Earth that we never had discovered before, right? And so my mind just goes to like, do people even know that that's what they want?
Yeah, it's like what does Casey say? People are symptom aware, not problem aware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything that they tell you is a symptom of the real problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
Because I think what you're saying is the actual real problem.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't see it as that.
Yeah. So I'm assuming, and I want to ask you specifically about how you view coaching and, what you do, and we're getting there, but on this topic, like you must be getting leads from people on LinkedIn. So they see examples, right? Yep. Of building coaching businesses on LinkedIn. And similarly, but different, I'm certainly going after people who have that hell feeling, and have looked ahead and seen their examples of what their life looks like if they go after the next rung, and they're pretty sure this ain't where it is. Yeah. And they're out of control. And so like that word self-directed, I'm not sure what I would replace it with, but like
they've run out of strategies. I'm
definitely not trying to convince anybody, right? That they need to do something. It's finding the people who like very much align with this idea of like, fuck, like I have just been handed shit my whole life and it's monotonous. And then, all this stuff that happens out of my control. Like I just want to do something that's mine. And that's kind of like the self-directed piece.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that makes sense because most people say that the word that typically they say is freedom.
Right.
Right. So
self-directed freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. They say freedom. I just want to, I want to work when I want to work. I want to do what I want to do. I don't want to be told what I can and cannot do and when I can and cannot do it. That's what people always say to me when I'm like, well, what is it that you want? I just want to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. That's basically it, which is like kind of funny. We all feel that way, but it's like, it's almost a little bit childish to some degree. Like it just sounds like a little kid. Like, I just want to do what I want,
Yeah.
But yeah, because from their vantage point, I get why that's what they're saying. Cause they literally don't ever feel like they can do whatever they want. Right.
Yeah.
But that's where I think the gap is in like, you don't actually just want to do whatever you want. What you actually want to do is create something fucking amazing that makes you feel powerful. But people don't, I don't think people know that yet. Like, they're still stuck in the world, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You and I have seen the other side of full blown freedom, and we know that there's a lot of trappings there and decision paralysis and all sorts of things. But yeah, from that vantage point, they're not there yet. That makes total sense. So how do you were called to be a coach. How do you view coaching and the value of it? You know, speaking more specifically for like the type of person that you serve, and why is it just like a no-brainer, or it should be a no-brainer?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is that couple things, maybe three things. So I don't know if any of your clients say this to you, but a lot of my clients have actually done a ton of therapy and yet still hire a coach. And I was the same. I wouldn't say a ton of therapy, but I've had therapists, and yet I've had a coach way longer than I've had any therapist, right? Coaching really was created as a result of some of the gaps in therapy, which is that most therapy is about how you feel, not about achieving a goal, right? And for better or for worse, we are goal-oriented beings. Like, we like to achieve things. We like to get things done. It makes us feel good, right? And so one, in terms of like why it's a no-brainer, is because like literally coaching is like the environment that you create around you so that you can achieve the goals that you have, right? And also even get clarity about exactly what those goals are, right? That's what I always found so powerful about coaching, was like, okay, I want to do this thing. Like, when I first found that coach, the reason why I wanted that coach were two things. One, I was like, I don't know if sales is for me. And what the hell else do I do if I'm not in sales? Because my degree is useless, as everyone's is. But two, I also want to stop sucking at my job, you know? Like, I really want to like stop the bleeding there. And then also I want to know what else I could be doing with my life and my career, right? And well, both of those things happened, right? Because coaching is like literally putting all the focus into one specific area of your life that you want dramatic change in, right? And so if there's something that you literally want so badly and you don't know how to get it, coaching to me is just like literally the no-brainer, because the accountability, like the uninterrupted space that you get to literally just like make freaking sense of what is not making sense in your brain. 95% of the time, as my clients are talking, they're like, and I'm hearing it, and now I get it.
Yeah.
You know? But then the other 5% of the time is like me reflecting back to them something they've never been able to see before, because they're like literally caught in a loop, like a scratch record, right? Mm-hmm. It just keeps playing the same thing. And I'll like reflect back to them to be like, basically, hear your contradiction. And then they're like, whoa, that's the problem. Like, I'm like living in this contradiction, right? And so the space to think through your thoughts, and then the reflection of someone showing you how your thoughts are basically causing the problems, right? Solves all the problems, essentially. Right? Yeah. So to me, like, therapy's great and all. However, I have hired way more coaches than I've ever hired therapists, and I think I probably will continue to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think people hire a coach for there's all sorts of coaches, right?
Sure.
I certainly get the label of, or the question like, well, are you a life coach or you a career coach? Like, what bucket do I put you in? Business coach? Yeah. And I never answer that directly. I'm like, well, I span all those things, and I use psychology. I'm not a psychologist, but people say all the time, like, whoa, this is like freaking therapy, but you know, better because it's directed. And it's amazing just how much, like, you get hired for an outcome, like some kind of tangible outcome, but the shifts and the transformations are all like psychological and and I think could be in therapy.
Absolutely. And I think I'm geeking out on marketing right now, but like marketing often does such a disservice, right? Because you have tangible outcomes and these kind of like flashy, sexy outcomes of like 6 figures and blah, 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 right? And but frankly, the truth is something so much deeper than that, right?
Yes.
And like the actual change that happens like inside of you that literally changes all the decisions that you make and all this kind of stuff. But you can't say that in marketing because everyone would be like, the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, it's the problem aware, symptom aware thing. It's
Right.
also the sell them what they want, give them what they
Yes,
need,
exactly.
type of a mentality as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is such a fascinating, that's why I'm so geeking out on it. It's like such a fascinating world, right? Because it's like, especially because like just what we did right now,
Right.
like self-directed. Do they know that though? Right.
Right.
So like, what's the marketing that's going to bring them to me
Right.
in a way that they will understand what self-directed is, but they never knew how to say it before,
Right. Yeah.
It's like such a like thin slice of the market, right? It's like, because if you say self-directed and they don't get it, then you're like, okay, we're probably not gonna
Right.
drive,
Yeah.
So it's like they wouldn't use the word, but they would get the word,
Yeah. And that's frankly, in this day and age, that's okay too. Like because I want people that I'm going to vibe with, right?
That's it.
So
I
that
don't know
is
if you're
sort
a
of like
Seinfeld fan, but do you watch Seinfeld?
yeah.
So you know how like Jerry's like 96% of the population is undateable? Same goes with clients. Okay?
Yeah.
Most people I absolutely don't want to work with. Okay. 96% actually. It's the same. Like, I just want to work with people that were on the same vibe,
So give us your pitch. Give us what do you do? And while we're on the topic, who do you want to work with and who can benefit the most from working with you?
Yeah. So I work with two types of clients, if you will. So the first one is corporate leaders who have a ton of experience and a ton of knowledge that they can package up into a coaching business, right? If you've been a corporate leader for a while and you're leading, humans, you've been coaching, right? And so many of them are like, I love the coaching aspect of my job. I fucking hate the forecasting and all the other bullshit, right? But what they don't know is how to package up their expertise and their knowledge into a coaching business, right? So that's audience number one, right? And so I have a program that their biggest problem is like they literally don't know what they don't know. You know what I mean? Like they have no, like, what is step one to starting my business, right? And I didn't know either. So I get it, right? So I like literally have like a blueprint of like step one is this, step two is this, right? But the other audience that that I have and that I'm able to help is people that have left the corporate world and have started their coaching business on LinkedIn. And let's say they're like a year or two in, and they're just not hitting, those 5-figure months that they want to hit in order to stay as a coach,
Right.
And have this business as a full-time career. And those seem like two different audiences, and they are, but their problems are exactly the same. Now they don't think that their problems are the same, but they are, because if you're a coach and it's not resonating, well, it comes back to the same thing, which is like, you're not clear about who your niche is, right? Your niche is not understanding you. And thus, if you're not clear about your niche, then your content's not going to be clear to that niche, right? Like it all kind of flows from there. Now, when they're in the corporate world and they don't know how to start a business, the first thing you need to know is like, who do you want to work with, right? And what are their problems? So what content is going to resonate with them? So it's actually the exact same problems, but in two kind of different stages, if you will.
Got it. So there's a lot of really high performing corporate leaders out there. And there's a lot of people who are looking at LinkedIn and are curious and would love that sort of lifestyle. So what is the differentiator for that, what is it, 4% of people who would really work well with you and you want to work with? Like what is, obviously with the content strategy, right? Like they are selecting into really liking you, what your story is about, Costa Rica, all of this stuff, as I did with your content. But are there any other markers that are standout for like what you are looking for in a client?
Yeah. So listen, I like to make money, but money is not my driver. So I don't like, if you're just like trying to make 7 figures and like, like money is your main driver in life, like we're probably not going to vibe. Right. So that's not it. The other piece of it too, is that I work really well with salespeople because obviously I am a salesperson as well. And I have found that like I have been able to have this success and have been able to do it pretty quickly and sustained it because of my sales skills. Right. And so I'm very confident that someone that has a sales background, I can very much help them in turning that very quickly into a coaching business. Not to say that if you don't have a sales background that you can't do it as well, but that gives you such a leg up in starting a business. I mean, I'm sure you can agree, right?
Totally.
Like if you understand how to sell, you get to bypass all the scary parts about like, are people going to want to pay me and all that? Like I've been in sales for 15 years, like rejection, who cares? Like people pay me, of course they would, like people have paid me so many times in my sales career, right? So like you just get to bypass all of that. So it happens faster for salespeople, I would say, versus non-salespeople. So yeah, those are kind of the 2 markers I would say. And
awesome.
Third one is so if you're not super money driven and hungry, my big thing is like build a business that actually you love and that you're not going to burn out from.
Yeah.
So if they're just trying to build a business and do it as fast as possible and make as much money, it's like, no, thank you. Because honestly, LinkedIn is a long-term strategy.
Yes.
You're not just going to start posting and get like all these leads and make 6 figures. Like that's not how it works, right? You have to be committed to the long-term viability of it, right? And so I give them the foundation for that to happen.
Yeah, makes total sense. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a few rapid fire sort of wrap up questions, and we're going to make sure we know, audience knows where to contact you and how to get in touch with you and where to find out more about you and all of that. And I'm going to give you a little bit of time for anything I missed as a really shitty host, or if there's anything else that you want to say. So rapid fire, is there a recent author, leader, influencer that you've come across that has really caught your attention and you think people need to know more about or follow?
Gabor Mate.
Yes. Okay. Good one.
Obsessed.
Have you read a book recently that has really influenced you, or maybe the book that's influenced you the most over your career?
I mean, I want to say Gabor Mate again, but his most recent one, The Myth of Normal, just completely changes your perspective about why we're all like the stress that we take on and how it literally creates the disease in the world. So I'll say that one, but I also have another one because that one's like a bit heavy maybe for people. The other book that I'm like obsessed with is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman.
Yep.
Basically about how like productivity is kind of a sham.
Yeah. How about we just do the right things?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. One piece of advice for someone who is just starting out in the world, trying to get a foothold in the world.
Like starting out on their...
Like not a baby, but like maybe getting their first job, becoming an actual human adult, and looking to carve their own way in the world.
I would honestly say study psychology, like study your own mind and study yourself, because you are your greatest barrier to success, but also you are your ticket to success as well. So it's you against you. The more you can learn, the better. Love that very much. All right. A lot of negativity in the world, a lot of conflict, a lot of strife. What has you excited about the next 12 months? Give us some positivity and optimism to close this thing out. Okay, well, other than LinkedIn, I don't have any other social media. And so in my world, there's actually no conflict or any strife because I live in ignorance. So very excited about that. But I was I was saying this to a client today too, and I think it's about, one, get rid of your social media so that you don't have to live in that like crazy world, but also it's about like reframing all the negativity, right? And so, again, like my clients come to me, I'm so afraid of LinkedIn and what people are going to say, and the way that I framed LinkedIn is like, everyone gets mad that the algorithms changed and my posts aren't doing well, and of course, like we all have that kind of immediate annoyance, right? But I've reframed LinkedIn as like, this is one of the greatest teachers I've ever had. I know that sounds like so cheesy, but like, okay, the LinkedIn's change, like the algorithms change, sick. Now I get to be challenged again for the 1 millionth time on how to get better, right? Because imagine if it wasn't. Imagine the algorithm was so easy and we all went viral. It would be so boring. And we would all we'd just be like, this sucks. Everything is so easy here, right? The fact that it's challenging keeps me interested and keeps me going, right? And so I guess just like reframing any of the algorithm's cool, man. The algorithm is here to teach you and to challenge you and to make your life not boring, essentially. So
awesome.
That's the positivity I'm putting out into the world.
Sounds great. Now let the audience know where the best place to find out more about you, your services, what you do. Obviously LinkedIn.
Yes.
But is there any other places that you'd like to direct anybody from the audience?
Everything about me is on LinkedIn, essentially. So right now I am running a boot camp, which is like 3 hours, 1 hour Monday, 1 hour Wednesday, 1 hour Friday, all about like jumpstarting your coaching business on LinkedIn. So we talk about nailing your niche and optimizing your LinkedIn profile for leads and how to write content that sells. And I actually gave live feedback on people's niche because that's the hardest thing to nail, is because like they all just sound boring and basic and don't resonate. So that's one of the big things that I'm offering right now, as well as like my main 90-day accelerator. But like I said, everything that you need to know about me is literally on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And to close this out, I'm going to give you a little space to say anything you want, or tell me a question I should have asked you that I didn't, or fill in any gaps where I have been a really horrible host.
This is the hardest question I've ever. I don't think you're a horrible host, and I think I've said quite a bit of what I love to talk about. So I will let you bask in the glory of I don't have anything else to say. And so you did a great job.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. Alli, thank you so much for sharing some time with us and your knowledge and your experience and your story. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing getting to know you, and I hope to continue that journey with you for a long, long time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been great.